My name is Lisa Shea, and this series is about all things horror authors, horror stories, horror poetry, and horror. So thank you for joining me. Today we're going to talk about Voodoo Doll. Voodoo Doll is one of my short stories. It is 24 pages long, 5977 words long. And if you haven't read it before, we're going to go into a lot of spoilers here, so you might want to read it first if you care about that. If you don't care about hearing about spoilers, then we will move forward and you can hear what my motivations and thoughts were behind writing this. So, in Voodoo Doll, sometimes I write about characters that appeal to the reader, and sometimes I write about characters who are sort of misfits. And in this case, the character is definitely on the misfit side. So her name is Bethany. She lives with her sister Gina. And she is very unhappy. Bethany is very unhappy about life. She feels that life has passed her by, that no one appreciates her, that it all sucks. And she's very grumpy in general about the way life is. And she thinks that things are other people's faults. So she's upset because her sister Gina didn't pick her up. So now she's walking through the rain from her job at a furniture shop to get to a bus stop. And luckily there's a thrift shop right next door. So she goes into the thrift shop to hang out and wait while she's waiting for the bus. So she's grumpy in the thrift shop. Who really wants this junk? Just everything strikes her as being wrong. So she goes around looking around at stuff, and she turns around, and then at the end of an aisle is a closeout box with 3 cloth dolls in it. These are voodoo dolls. Well, she'd played with these as a kid, of course. Stabbed lots of pins into my mom, my dad, and of course my older sister. Never seemed to work much, and I'd given them to the dogs to rip apart to shreds. So she'd been this way since she was young. She always has this kind of attitude about life. So she grabs up the last 3 voodoo dolls. She tries to negotiate for the voodoo dolls. She gets them 3 for 20, and she gets them and she takes them home. And then the city bus pulls into view, and she's happy. Look, the bus is on time. She's got her voodoo dolls, and everything is good. So she goes home. She's living in the same house as her sister. She pours herself a vodka and tonic, and she looks at these voodoo dolls. And there's sorts of instructions about the voodoo dolls. Put the person's name in a piece of paper, stick it into the slot in the back, and so on. She doesn't bother reading the instructions. She just wants to stab pins into voodoo dolls. So she's staring at these voodoo dolls. She's got 3 of them. Who is she going to teach a lesson to? One of them is to the owner of the shop that she works at, Mr. George K. Banks. And he apparently yells at her because she's late for work again, she's late back from lunch, all these things that she's doing wrong, but she's just grumpy that she's being yelled at it for. So he was complaining about his knee hurting and that he was worried about having to not ride his motorcycle because of the knee. So she was going to make the knee even worse. So she jabs a pin into Mr. Banks's knee. And she happily thinks about him yowling in pain. So then the next person, she's got 2 voodoo dolls left. The next one is Mrs. Argencio, who is one of her co-workers, and apparently this Mrs. Argencio doesn't treat her quite well enough, and apparently she's always gotten some sorts of stomach problems, so she jabs it into the stomach to make those stomach problems even worse. So while she's got 1 doll left and thinking about what to do, her sister comes home, and her sister is all happy in that she's got her boyfriend Charles with her, and she is joyful about this Charles, and Bethany groans because this Charles person has been interfering with their life. Here she is thinking that she could renew her bonds with her sister, but this Charles person is always in life, so clearly she's going to deal with the Charles person, and she drives the pin right into his crotch. So next morning comes through, and she wakes up, and she's grumpy, and she gets to work, and she's surprised because her boss is not complaining about his knee. Instead, he's actually super happy. He says that the knee is feeling better, and that he's going to go out and ride his motorcycle. So now, of course, Bethany's really upset. How is these dolls not working properly? They seem to be broken. And next her co-worker comes over, Mrs. Argencio, and says that her stomach's feeling better. So now clearly these dolls are completely broken. So it shows what great restraint I have that I made it all the way to 5 without buying a chainsaw and hacking the 2 of them into tiny little bits. Clearly she's got some grumpy issues. So she storms back over to the thrift shop. She says she wants a refund. The thrift store owner points to the giant sign hanging behind her, says no refunds. So she gives up on getting the refund. She slams her way home. And now her sister and Charles are sitting there making all happy faces, and this makes Bethany even less happy. So she goes and lays out the 3 dolls in her bedroom and tries to figure out what's going on. So her boss, Mr. George Banks, has a pin stuck in his kneecap. Mrs. Argencio has a pin stuck into her abdomen. Charles has a pin stuck to his crotch, and now suddenly she realizes that when she stuck pins into the dolls, she wasn't hurting them further in those areas. She was actually making those areas better. So the dolls are broken, but then suddenly she realizes that she could use this twist and cause even more pain and damage to people, because that's her whole point in life. She doesn't think that she could actually help people. She's trying to figure out how to hurt them the most. So now she says, oh, look, Mr. Banks had a knee problem, and now he's all happy because he can ride his motorcycle again. So if I just pulled the pin out of the knee at the opportune moment, and all of a sudden his knee went back to being painful all again, then I could cause even more trouble for him than just having him in pain in general. So now she's starting to plot out devious long-term things instead of just jabbing pins into people, or into dolls, which represent people. So she goes into the furniture store. Now she's actually joyful because she has this plan to ruin people's lives, and that makes her happy. So she plans out Mr. Banks' motorcycle trip with him, and they have a map, and they do the time for each location, and he's going to have a Facebook feed about it. And so the day of his trip, she sits there and she watches his feed. She sees exactly where he is, and then exactly when he's in a dangerous spot, she removes the pin. Come on up. Zuzu's coming to visit us. Come on up. Oh, she's thinking about visiting. There she goes. Good kitten. We're talking about voodoo dolls. But you are a good kitten. You would never use voodoo dolls, would you? All right, so her boss, what are you doing? She never used voodoo dolls, but she'd knock over every single thing on my desk that she possibly can. All right, so now she's curling up on the keyboard, so we just have to make sure she doesn't press some sort of a end recording key. There you go. Yes. No, not quite right there. Yeah, all right, well, we'll do this. It's all right. Yes, you're a good kitty. Zuzu is the girl cat. Felix is the boy cat. They are siblings, and they're both black, of course. All right, Zuzu has hunkered down, so now I can't move my hands because she's laying on my hand like a pillow, but that's okay. All right, so Bethany watches her boss driving around on this dangerous path, and when she sees that her boss is somewhere super dangerous, she removes the pin. So now that she has stopped soothing the wound goes back to causing trouble for him again, and mysteriously, now there's no more pictures posting. It's as if something's happened to him. So she's all happy. All right, sorry, Julie. Zuzu, I have to move my screen. And a few hours later, it was all over the news. Local cyclist plummeted down a twisty road. Broken bones, punctured spleen. There's something about spleens. He'd be in the hospital for months. So now she's super joyful. No, that's my controller. Don't play with that. So she's super joyful. She's caused all sorts of harm to her boss. More harm than she possibly could have thought possible. So now she moves on to doll number 2. Mrs. Argencio. So she says, I couldn't just bring her in a jar of the spiciest salsa. That would be suspicious. So she's going to try something a little more subtle. So they're having a party is the wrong word. They're having a get-together to help soothe the family of the boss so that they bring him treats and dishes and that sort of thing. So they all bring different kinds of food objects. And they go in, and she brings the heroine, or anti-heroine, I suppose we want to call it, brings in a spicy dish. And of course, Mrs. Argencio is nervous about trying a spicy dish because her stomach tends to cause her problem. But no, the heroine gently says, well, your stomach problems seem to be better, and this is an amazing dish, and it's done so well. And Mrs. Argencio says, maybe just one small piece. And the heroine says, if you're sure, we wouldn't want you to get sick or anything. So she's trying to put on a good face and say, well, it's not my fault you're eating this thing. But of course, Mrs. Argencio does try it, and she starts eating it, and then the heroine pulls the pin out of the body. So now all of a sudden, Mrs. Argencio's stomach issues all call back, and she's just eaten the super spicy thing. So now she's sick. So now the heroine drinks 4 vodka tonics, is celebrating. She's got both her boss and her evil coworker out of action for months. and now she's in charge of things, and she's still plotting about what she's going to do with Charles, which is her sister's boyfriend. So Bethany has the table all laid out for a nice dinner. That's her. She's getting everything nice and ready to have a nice dinner with her sister and with the boyfriend. And then just while the boyfriend is driving over, Bethany takes the pin out of the groin, which she didn't really think was going to make a difference because she didn't think that her sister would be with or not be with the boyfriend just because of good sex or not good sex. But instead of just leaving it at that, she jabs the pin into his eye so that now his eyes were of different strengths. And one of them was a super healed eye and one was a not healed eye. And the guy was driving to their house. So this would cause him a serious vision problem right in the middle of while he was driving. So half hour came and went. The sister checked the phone. Well, no messages from him, but it looks like there was an accident on the highway. He's probably just caught behind that. Well, a half hour later, the officers come to the front door, and it turns out the boyfriend has been traumatically injured. He was alive, but barely. And it says, I, the loving sister, was at her side the entire time. So she now managed to damage the boyfriend by giving him better vision. So in the other cases, it was the particular body part she was working on. In this case, she switched body parts to cause the damage that she wanted. Yes, you are so cute. All right, give you a little scratch. But I am busy right now. Okay? Good, Zuzu. All right. So life is perfect. She's moved into Mr. Banks's office. She's chosen her furniture and decor from the most expensive collections. All the employees are her personal minions. So she gets home, and she sees that her sister is home. And she asks her sister if she's okay. And the sister says that she ran out of tissues, so she went into her sister's, the main heroine's room, to get a few. I hope you don't mind. And of course the heroine says, I don't care at all. So the heroine's confused why her sister's acting a bit oddly, but her boyfriend's in the hospital, so maybe it's just the way that the sister is dealing with these kinds of things. So then we switch to the next day, and the heroine climbs out of bed, and her legs are aching like they hadn't in years and years, not since the horseback riding accident in college. And Gina looks over at the sister and says, how are you feeling? And she says, oh, I don't feel well. So she says that she can't get any more pills because the doctor was unlikely to prescribe her lots of pills. And then all of a sudden her vision, which had not been good as a teenager, but then suddenly went better, is now not working well. And then the world looks like it's through thick, greasy saran wrap. And her thumb throbbed from where she jammed it in a mountain biking accident. And her eardrum ached from where she burst it by accident when learning to scuba dive. And she tries to figure out why all of these pains, which had all been getting healed over the years, all have suddenly come back to her. And then her mouth drops open in shocked horror. And then all the pain just deluges her completely, and she's wholly lost. So this ending part, I think, is where most people in this series... What are you doing, kitty? Yes, you're a good kitty. Yes, you can be down there. That's all right. All right, so this ending part, I think, is where some people got confused. Because all of a sudden there's all these painful things happening to the heroine, and there's no clear indication of why they're happening. But I was hoping to give enough subtle clues, and maybe I was too subtle, along the way of what probably did happen. Because the heroine, Bethany, found voodoo dolls, which were made by a local voodoo doll maker. And when she stuck pins into the voodoo dolls, she was able to heal people's issues. And she used this skill for evil. But the sister's always been around and taking care of her. So then we hear that all of these different things that the main character, Bethany, had endured through her life, all suddenly mysterious got healed. So she had awful vision when she was a teenager, and then poof, that got healed. She had gotten into a scuba diving accident, and then poof, that got healed. She'd been in a mountain biking accident, poof, that got healed. So hopefully we get the sense that it was her sister that had these voodoo dolls, because the voodoo dolls were made locally and they're made by someone that the community knew about. So the sister had been gathering up these voodoo dolls. And any time that her sister, Bethany, was having some sort of accident or injury, then Gina would get a voodoo doll and stick a pin into it and write the name on it and everything else and help heal her. And she was just doing this without letting her know, as a way to look out for her and be a kind, gentle sister. And once the sister needed tissues and went into Bethany's room to get tissues and saw the 3 voodoo dolls there and realized what was happening, she decided that she was not going to take care of her sister anymore. And she went back to her room and pulled out all of the different pins. So now all of those ailments that Bethany had had over the years and that were being masked by the voodoo dolls all came back all at once at the exact same time and completely deluged her with pain. So that's what the meaning of the ending of this story is that the sister Gina had been looking out for her sister Bethany all this time, had a collection of voodoo dolls, and was taking care of each ailment one by one to make sure that her sister Bethany was living the best life that she possibly could. And that when she realized that Bethany had sabotaged her happy relationship, that she decided that there was going to be an end to the voodoo doll taking care of that was going on. So I hope that makes the situation more clear about what was happening and what the progression of events was in here. Let me know if you still have a question about how this played out and how the different voodoo dolls worked, I suppose, or why I wrote it the way that I wrote it. Let me know if you've written similar stories. I'd be interested in reading them. Please be sure to like and subscribe. And I look forward to talking with you again soon as I go through future stories and talk with future authors. Thank you and have a great day.